And now for the part that I'm really excited about. I've created a complete combat encounter, level appropriate for a party of level 7 adventurers. This is the first time that I've tried anything like this, and I will admit I made a few mistakes during combat. However, in the process of making this, I ran the scenario 2 different times all the way through, and I think that the outcome is fairly reasonable and fairly likely. I will say that from a DM perspective, the one thing that I changed here was I gave the orcs a lot more hit points. They each have 33 hit points to allow them to not just die immediately to a level 7 party. The rest of the monsters are all by the book. So without further ado, let's get into this adventure. 3 villagers have gone missing in the past 10 days, and your party has been hired to investigate their disappearance. Through the clever investigation and tracking of Ren, our rogue ranger hero, you've discovered bands of orcs patrolling the forest around an overgrown keep that was formerly a bandit hideout. They seem to be taking orders from a strange man in simple clothes who carries a long quarterstaff. Through distraction and stealth, thanks in large part to Ren's Pass Without Trace spell, you've managed to isolate and destroy several smaller groups of orcs while remaining unnoticed. Bibby, the gnome wizard, and his faithful familiar Artemis the owl, along with Davian, the dragonborn paladin, sneak along the western wall of an open chamber, overhearing several orcs and their warchief talking with the strange man. Ren glides soundlessly down the adjacent hallway. The party easily sneaks into the ruined fortress with some much-needed help from Ren's Pass Without Trace spell. The lowest roll of 7 becomes a 17, beating the passive perception of all the enemies. The enemies will be surprised. Initiative is rolled, the stage is set, it's time to act. Ren makes a flanking maneuver around the left side, coming up directly behind one of the orcs. The first scimitar strike misses, the second one hits, dealing 8 slashing damage. The short sword attack misses. Then he casts Hunter's Mark on the Orc Warchief in the back. Next up is Bibby, who steps out from behind cover and begins casting a spell. The 2 orcs in front of him are consumed in a cone of fear. They both make wisdom saves. One of them succeeds and one fails. Bibby then sends his trusty owl familiar Artemis in to distract the orc faced with Ren, giving him advantage on the next attack. Bibby then retreats behind cover once more as Davian, the paladin, charges forward and casts Bless on all 3 party members. Ren casts Hex on the Orc Warchief, and his blades flash once more against the orc in front of him. A 15 with his scimitar will hit, and now with advantage, and since the orc has taken damage, Hunter's Prey and Sneak Attack are both in effect. He deals 24 damage with a single strike. Second scimitar attack hits as well, felling the orc with 8 slashing damage. He charges forward to their leader, who is now afflicted with both Hex and Hunter's Mark, and lunges with his short sword. 19 will hit, dealing 12 damage. The orcs are next. One of them moves into a flanking position. It is still unable to hit Ren. The second orc attacks Davian. A 20 will miss his 21 AC. Bibby now sends Artemis to distract the Warchief, giving Ren advantage on his next attack. Then he steps out and fires 4 darts of magical force that all strike the Warchief simultaneously. The mysterious stranger, unable to act until now, vanishes into thin air. The Orc Warchief lets out a mighty battle cry, giving advantage to himself and his allies. He swings with his great axe, getting a 16 to hit. Ren parries with Defensive Duelist. Second attack is a 19. 21 slashing damage to Ren. Third attack is a 23. 19 more slashing damage to Ren. He's just taken 40 damage and is in trouble. Davian sees his friend in need, pushes past the frightened orc, who misses his attack of opportunity. Davian swings his warhammer at the orc flanking Ren. A 16 strikes true, and he uses a first level Divine Smite, adding 5 radiant damage to his 11 bludgeoning. He brings his hammer down once more, again Divine Smite. 5 bludgeoning damage, and 8 radiant. Ren swings his scimitar at the orc behind him, wheels around with his short sword, getting a critical hit, felling the orc with 12 damage. His attack with advantage on the Orc Warchief is an 18, which will hit. He deals 15 damage with a single strike. The frightened orc hurls a javelin at Davian and misses. Artemis swoops in and claws at the Orc Warchief's head once more. And Bibby steps out from behind cover, muttering an arcane incantation as he casts dissonant whispers on the Orc Warchief, who just barely makes his wisdom save, meeting Bibby's 15 spell save DC. Bibby finishes the incantation and takes cover. The mysterious stranger reappears out of nowhere, now 8 feet tall, terrible to behold, and in place of its walking stick, a massive glaive that it brings down on Ren and Davian in turn. The first attack misses Ren, the second misses Davian. Orc Warchief attacks Ren once more, was able to parry again with his short sword. The second attack misses. Davian gathers all of his divine power and channels it into a conquering presence, attempting to frighten all 3 enemies. They must all make wisdom saves. The Orc Warchief fails, the Orc fails, and the Oni fails. They are now all frightened of Davian. The frightened Orc, now unable to move in Davian's aura of conquest, can do nothing but hurl another javelin at disadvantage, missing terribly as his hands shake with fear. Artemis moves in to distract the Oni, giving advantage on the next attack against it. Then takes cover behind a pillar. Bibby steps out and hurls 3 more darts of magical force at the Orc Warchief. The Oni takes a huge breath, exhales a cone of magical ice, enveloping Ren and Davian as it casts Cone of Cold. They must both make Constitution saving throws. A 14 passes. A 16 passes with the aid of Davian's aura of protection. They both take 12 cold damage as they brace themselves against the magical attack. The Warchief, now swinging with disadvantage, misses Ren with the first attack, and as its courage begins to falter, its second attempt is not even close. Davian, seeing Ren nearly on death's door, moves forward and reaches out his hand. Holy energy envelops Ren, and he's healed for 30 hit points. Davian then interposes himself between the Oni and his friend. With his courage renewed, standing next to his companion, Ren swings his scimitar at the Orc Warchief, landing a critical hit. With all of his resources now stacked upon this one target, the strike deals massive damage, felling the Orc Warchief with exactly 41 damage. He moves his Hunter's Mark over to the Oni, swings with his short sword, getting a 17, which strikes the Oni for 13 damage. 3 more orcs that were on patrol enter the fortress from the north, coming up behind Bibby. They hurl 3 javelins at him. 2 of them connect. The first deals 6 piercing damage, and Bibby is able to make his concentration check. The second deals 5 more damage, and he makes his concentration check once more. Seeing the new threat appear behind him, Bibby conjures a magical web in an attempt to restrain the orcs. Artemis then swoops in, distracting the Oni to give advantage on the next attack against it. At the start of the Oni's turn, it regains 10 hit points, but then it loses 3 from Davian's aura. It swings with its glaive, getting 17 to hit because it's swinging with disadvantage. Ren parries. The next strike with disadvantage misses wide. Davian swings his warhammer. 17 hits the Oni. 8 bludgeoning damage. And now a second level smite for 17 radiant damage. The Oni is still frightened of Davian as he swings his hammer once more. Davian was able to keep concentration on Bless after the Cone of Cold hit him, but his last attack misses. Ren sees a perfect opening and slashes with his scimitar, cutting deeply across the Oni's chest. A critical hit, once again with all of his resources stacked on one target. The crit deals massive damage, as he takes 40 hit points from the Oni in one strike. His second attack with the scimitar also hits, dealing 17 more damage, 57 damage in a single turn. Impressive. The Oni is just able to dodge the last short sword attack. 2 orcs in Bibby's magical web fail their dexterity saves and are restrained. The third one is able to barely skirt around, charges Bibby with its axe held high. Bringing it down, 22 will hit, 15 slashing damage. Bibby is able to make his concentration check. The web stays intact. One of the orcs is able to break free from the webbing. It charges Bibby, but it had to use its action to break free, and it doesn't have quite enough movement to get to him. Bibby, seeing the impending danger, transforms into a cloud of silvery mist and reappears near Artemis, takes cover behind the pillar. Artemis once again claws at the face of the Oni, who is bleeding profusely. It regains some of its health at the start of its turn, and strikes out with its glaive 2 more times, attempting to bring one of its assailants down with it. Attacking at disadvantage, the Orc gets a 17, and Ren parries using his defensive duelist again. The second strike is an 11, and it misses. One Orc was finally able to break its fear, and it swings its great axe at Davian, but a 17 misses. The Oni finally breaks Davian's conquering presence, but is it too late? Davian swings his warhammer and hits the Oni for 5 bludgeoning damage and 10 radiant. He hits once more with a 16, 8 more bludgeoning damage, but Davian is out of spell slots and cannot smite. Ren strikes with his scimitar, getting a 23 to hit. The attack deals 25 damage, felling the vile creature. He moves his hunter's mark to the nearby Orc. 23 hits for 13 damage. His last short sword attack also hits for 14 more damage. The Orc, seeing his companions lying dead around him, disengages and attempts to flee. The one Orc still caught in the web is unable to free himself. Seeing their leader dead, one of their companions restrained and the other fleeing, the 2 Orcs ponder their choices. One of them decides to flee and dashes out of the combat.
What a mess!
The other one musters its last remaining courage, steps forth to hurl a javelin at Ren. Its trembling hand makes the javelin sail wide and realizes its folly.
Oh no!
Bibby, sensing that the tides are turning, comes out from cover and hurls a firebolt at the Orc, just missing. Davian gives chase, swinging his warhammer twice, connecting once for 8 bludgeoning damage. Ren follows his adventuring companion into the fray once more, finds himself shoulder to shoulder with the stalwart paladin, a familiar place that gives him a sense of power. Artemis claws at the Orc as it attempts to flee. Ren strikes out with his scimitar, hitting the Orc, dealing just enough damage to kill it. He drops his scimitar, draws a dagger, and hurls it at the final Orc. Buries itself in the Orc's neck, falls to the ground, dead. The last Orc restrained in the web will be captured and interrogated. As you can see here, this encounter will be rated deadly for a party of 3 level 7s. I have, in fact, boosted the Orcs' hit points up to 33 each, but changed nothing else in their stat block. They have a +5 to hit, which is not great, but they still have a chance to hit any of the party members. The Orc Warchief is fairly formidable with his 16 AC, 93 hit points, and decent damage, dealing 15 on average. He has a +6 to hit, and he can give himself and his allies advantage for 1 turn while making a 3rd attack as a bonus action. It looks like I actually misused the battle cry effect, further evidence that it's hard to run 6 different characters in one combat. Battlecry is an action, so he would be able to give advantage to all his allies and make 1 attack as a bonus action. I gave him 3 attacks, but that balances out some of the mistakes I made in the party's favor. The Oni, once again, is a CR7, so supposed to be level appropriate for a party of level 7s. It has 16 AC, 110 hit points, it can fly, and it has some spell casting. I did use Invisibility and Cone of Cold, which I think are the 2 most powerful spells the Oni has. It has magic weapons, it regenerates 10 hit points, it makes 2 attacks with its glaive, dealing 15 on average. It can shape change. I used that shape change to make it large, giving it that extra damage. Well, that was really fun for me. I hope you enjoyed it too. Remember, please leave a comment with any monsters or classes that you'd like to see in videos like this.